Hi everyone, my name is Yasmin Khaytler, and with me today I have Aida Murad. Aida, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. Aida is an economist turned artist and was shortlisted for America's Next Top Artist by the Smithsonian Channel. Aida turned to art after becoming paralyzed, semi-paralyzed due to a health trauma for 4.5 years, and turned to art and has a really unique connection to art in that she, paints with her fingers and often with her eyes closed. And she sold out 12 exhibitions, has exhibited globally, including in Riyadh very recently. And her works are owned by the likes of the British royal family and the Qatar Foundation, among others. So we're very lucky to have her here with us today, not just because of her incredible personal journey, but also because Aida sits at the intersection of the creative economy, being an economist by training and now an artist and an advocate for the arts, in terms of social impact and the creative industry. So thank you again for being here. And I would love to start by getting us all on the same playing field by asking, what do we mean by the creative economy?
So bravo for memorizing that. Kudos for memories. So the creative economy, first, let's actually back up and identify what's the creative industries. Because the creative economy is made up of the creative industries. So typically when you think of something creative, people think of visual arts. But really the creative economy is made up of visual art, which includes paintings, sculptures, etc. Then you go into film, that includes also gaming, that also includes fashion, architecture, interior design, so and also music. Mm-hmm. So it expands into a lot more than what typically people think of when they think of art and creative industries. So the creative economy is how do you get all these different industries and subsectors to contribute to the economy on both cultural and economic value.
I see.
Yeah.
And so this creative economy makes up around 10% of the world's GDP, right? It's an incredibly significant portion of it that often seems to go overlooked as, an industry where one doesn't really make a lot of money. So what if we look at it then from the economic lens, and I notice you're sort of excited about the of how does profit tie to the arts?
So it's interesting. You said something of this is an industry that usually people don't make a lot of money from, but this is I think one thinks of artists by themselves and usually they associate starving artists, right? Mm-hmm. There's that kind of narrative. But that's one stakeholder, one player in the broader sphere of visual arts, let's just say. There are so many, if you look at the supply chain of what it takes to create a film by itself, like the amount of employment, the amount of contribution to the economy. So profit is there. It's just for some reason, history has portrayed artists specifically as a sector where you can't make a lot of money. At some point that was true, but now it is evolving and changing. Why? I think for many reasons, but one of them is technology. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, to be discovered as a musician is much easier today than it was 10 years ago, right? You don't have to now go chase someone to give them your demo tape or a CD. Now you put it on Spotify and you can get more easily discovered. The other part is, again, Spotify didn't exist where you could get passive income, right? Same with visual art, NFTs. Initially, why were the NFTs popular is because artists could get some form of income after a piece was resold. So now, traditionally in auction houses, if your piece as an artist, most of them are dead, but for living artists, which is also an interesting thing, that more living artists are becoming middle to higher income class artists. They're less rare, let's just say. So I'll kind of pause there.
We talk about the creative industry, and particularly, music and film is one that seems very transparent to us. But then you look at something like the art world, which is, where you reside, and that feels very opaque. So maybe that's why a lot of people have confusion around that economy, because it's so hard to understand how things work in that.
It is actually very opaque. And I have built sold out 12 collections, had 36 exhibitions, and have not worked with. So traditionally, artists have an artist manager, a gallerist, and or an art dealer. So each one plays a different role. Manager obviously manages your life and work. Gallerists, for people who don't know, have a space and exhibit your art. And then art dealer, actually I've been learning more, is basically the one who is a key gatekeeper for you, can actually make or break your career. Because how does an artist increase the value of its paintings, of his or her paintings? One is by who's collected you, where have you exhibited, and the amount of years you've created art. And then, but really, actually, and there's more metrics, but really the most important thing is who's collected you. So I say that that's very important to going back to the opaqueness, because what I've noticed is for some reason they want to keep this very exclusive, unapproachable aura. And that usually means pretentious and rude. And I am unavailable for that. I did not go to art in order to to be a pretentious and rude person, or to be around that world. So I distanced myself from the art world. And I'm very happy. And I didn't find a lot of role models who are an artist in the art world and also caring for impact. I kept asking myself, how can I use art for raising awareness around nature conservation, behavior change, and well-being, etc. But the beautiful thing now is it's evolving. I think people are becoming, more conscious that gatekeepers are, I don't want to say less important, but they're gatekeeping less, because there's now different avenues to reach certain people. Like I've had few artist friends who got very interesting art collectors, but just by sending them an email and saying, here's my portfolio, I think you'd like it. And that happened actually during COVID, and a lot of people were just, had time, so they actually would look at things and respond. In the old days, that would not have worked because it was held by the gatekeepers. One thing I'll just say before I pause, a critical thing I tell anyone who's interested in going into the arts is, and part of my advocacy is, we have to change the societal narratives around being an artist. So typically you think artist, you think starving artist. And I challenge that to say, why can't we be thriving artists, right? So I know when I wanted to become an artist, I had so many breakdowns because I was so scared not to be able to make money and to live properly. I was just like, this is impossible. I'm going to get pressures here, la, la, la. And then thankfully to my community, they just said, that's unacceptable. You light up when you paint. You're miserable when you do anything else. So you have to do it. And then I just said, okay, if I can't find the example of someone who can do it, then I have to be the example. And thankfully there are examples of people. But then the next thing is artists are portrayed as disorganized, also depressed mostly. If you look at films, like I could not find one film that portrayed an artist who was happy and who was thriving financially and who was organized, and also who was not on substances. So we have some work to do to change these narratives, because we're losing people from entering the workforce, I believe, because of these barriers.
I agree. I think when I think back on it as well, there's almost always, an almost direct correlation between suffering and how valuable or how important a piece of art seems to be. Whether that's in film, like when people get Oscars, it's always tied to, did they lose a dramatic amount of weight? Did they suffer something traumatic while filming? And when you look at artists as well, so many who become famous only after starving to death, essentially, this narrative that you cannot be a healthy and productive member of society while producing art that is also of value, it's very interesting. And I wonder if there's something to it of almost psychologically, you don't get to do something that you really enjoy and have a good time of it. You have to pick sort of one or the other.
Yeah, I love this topic. I'm super passionate about it. And because I really believe one of my purposes on in this earth is to help rewire that narrative. I've been through many hard chapters in my life, but I've chosen, and those pains have helped me become the person that I am. I'm so grateful for it. But I want to live a blissful, delicious life. And I've realized that at some point I was addicted to pain and suffering. Most of us are. If think about it, when you go to a vacation, it takes you usually 3-4 days to learn how to enter vacation mode. By the time you've gotten into vacation mode, you're back on the plane, back to work. And you're like, I didn't really enjoy this. It's because we haven't trained the muscle of whether it's relaxation, whether it's joy, whether it's bliss. And I get into a lot of debates about, do we need pain, deep pain, suffering, in order to learn something, to be better humans? And I don't think we do need that. I think pain and suffering is beautiful, but I think what we do need is presence and gratitude. And when you have those two, anything is possible. So where art comes in for me personally, and what I do, I give a lot of workshops, whether it's for cancer patients all the way to, which we'll talk about, like Google, their innovation team on how to use art to think differently. So I use art for myself and for people to help them retrain their thinking muscles. So we're used to, again, the canvas of suffering. We're comfortable with it. But when we think of a canvas of getting everything that I want in life, you maybe open the first stroke, but then you get blocked. You're like, I don't know how to dream. I don't know what to think. And then you get scared. And there's this book I highly recommend called The Big Leap, that talks about how we self-sabotage when we exceed. It's like we're all rubber bands. So if we've exceeded our level of success and happiness, of what we're used to, right? You either bounce back to your old size, or you break the rubber band and you enter a new size of a rubber band. And there are different reasons. Like, for example, my own self-sabotage reason in the past was I didn't want to outshine others. I just wanted everyone to be happy, and that scared me, actually. So every time I get great news, I somehow self-sabotage, and whether personal or professional. So I worked on these things, and art was a tool to help me imagine how beautiful it would be if I go into this new rubber band and everyone's happy. And if the people who aren't happy for me, then God bless them and go.
That's beautifully put. I think it also, you're hinting at the larger sort of creative economy that's kind of hidden behind the existing one, right? So the sphere in which you play is much broader than just the typical supply chain of the arts. It's how do you use the creative elements in therapy, in innovation, in all of these different things. So there's a lot of sectors in which there's a lot more interconnection, or we could have even more, with the right push and the right initiatives.
100%. So when you think of, this question takes me to multiple, I think, in bullet points. So bullet point 1, think about travel, right? For most countries, or a lot of countries, tourism is key for economic growth, right? Where do you choose to go? Usually someone chooses to go somewhere that they will feel bright, they'll feel there's some interesting culture to explore. And art plays a huge role there. So I forgot the exact number, but I recall there's more art districts and creative districts a city has, the higher the rate of tourism for it. And I don't have the exact numbers, but so that's number 1. Number 2, if you look in history, whether it's in Rome, Florence, Paris, New York, usually where artists move to, eventually they get kicked out because prices have increased and because that's where the new development is. But there's something, I was going into the research of where artists they breathe in life into the space. And then somehow real estate, it's more appealing for people to come develop it and, bring in new things. And then I forgot my third point, but
yeah. So, and I mean, you do a lot of this work in terms of supporting people in integrating art into innovation, into mental health. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that came about, how you view that?
Yeah. So before I share how I got into it, I think one question I've been meditating with a lot is, what is success? What is the definition of success for us? And I said this recently, that a lot of it would be around, money or position or certain status. But I've been, sitting with more and more people, and even with myself, of it's really how well are you doing? How many good friends do you have? How many times did you smile today? And are you satisfied? Are you fulfilled? So that is something that I feel the world is starting to evolve into more, and which is a key element actually for economic contribution. And we'll talk about that. But how did I get into this space? Is basically, it was for my own mental health. So I was semi-paralyzed, as you mentioned, for 4.5 years. And that was extremely a painful time. And then there was a point where the doctor said, you have 3 months left to use your hands and feet because of my bones were eroding. And I was applying for jobs in the US. And I'm a very transparent person. And they asked me, why should we hire you? And I was depressed. I didn't know at the time I was, because, as an Arab, we didn't really grow up with that kind of vocabulary. And I told them, I don't know, there's nothing special about me. I didn't get the job. But I keep imagining what would have happened if I got the job. Anyway, so I left the space, and I was like, okay, I have 3 months left. I don't have a job. 3 months left for my hands and feet, which were critical. And I just said, okay, God, you gave me a unique fingerprint. I know that. So there has to be something special about me. I just don't know what it is. So it was like an angel whispered in my ear and just said, go get paint. And I just started doing this over and over, like with my fingerprint, hoping to unlock the answer as to why am I special? Why am I on earth? And then I found first a space where I could express my emotions, because, especially as an Arab and an Arab female who at the time was single, and you have different pressures that we also don't talk about, like you can't show your dirty laundry because you have to be an eligible candidate to get married, and etc. These are small subtle things that do impact our behavior. So I had nowhere to go to talk about my suffering. And even some friends told me, like, don't tell people that you're suffering from this, because who's going to want to marry someone who has like a damaged hand, damaged leg, and la la la. And I believed that for a little bit. So art was the only place where I could even process these emotions and understand what was happening. And then, fast forward, it's been over 10 years, and I've, just found a medium, a tool to help people live a better life. And I have everyone paint with their hands or their body, because have you read the book The Body Keeps the Score?
No.
It's a fascinating book. But basically, the gist of it is your body contains your history, a lot of energy. So if you experience a trauma, it's stored somewhere in your body. And you find it also in ancient Chinese and Asian cultures, that each organ is linked to different emotion, etc. But we won't go down that rabbit hole. Point is, I have people paint with their hands for different reasons. One is, adults are suffering from a lot of stress these days, and they've forgotten how to play. And I find children, especially children who've had healthy childhoods, play for the sake of playing, and are curious, and are just messy, and are free. And I want to remind adults how to do that, and which eventually brings you closer to joy. But then also it allows you to release stored things. And then third, it gives you another form of language to express. And there's a famous quote that says, expression is the opposite of depression. So yeah, and it's kind of grown from well-being, from having, I've worked with people who are experiencing severe depression, and I have them paint a canvas of what does depression look like. And that alone is huge because they're so shamed by themselves or by society, wherever, of how dare you feel these emotions, especially if you have a quote unquote good life.
Yeah.
So we talk to it, we don't shame it. And then we go to the second canvas of, okay, you created a bit of space. Now imagine what could be possible here if you could have anything you wanted, if you could be anything you wanted. And then we start to get to know it more. And then they'll feel like, oh, I feel this color yellow. And I'm like, don't think, paint with your eyes closed now and just go. And on the opposite end of now, this is well-being. Now we have innovation. So I worked with MIT engineers, Moonshot Factory, which is Google's innovation and R&D arm. And in order for them to solve and come up with a moonshot, which is like a crazy big idea that solves for like huge problems, we use art to help them see the problem and the solution differently. Which brings me to a statistic that I'm in love with is, do you know what polymaths are?
People who do both art and science,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
So basically left and right side brain. I actually don't know about the left and right side, but they're artists, whether it's pianists or painters, and they're an expert in a scientific field. So the top 12% of Nobel Prize winners are polymaths. And in their journals and in their different writings, they talk about how they were able to see their problem and the solution differently when they left their problem and went to the piano and let themselves flow. And they came back and just saw it from a different angle. And this is the power of some art form that takes you out of that box and lets you see it differently. So I was working with a few different governments because they want to quantum leap with their workforce. And I'm like, build more polymaths. It's actually a critical pillar. And then there's other evidence about that shows that you increase your soft skills. You have a more satisfied workforce, which usually leads to less crime rates, etc. But I'm going to pause there because I talked a lot.
No, thank you. That's so interesting. And I've also thought about this from the lens of art and science almost going hand in hand. So I was recently interviewing Walter Isaacson, who wrote the biographies of Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Leonardo da Vinci. And what these men had in common is a huge appreciation for the aesthetic of things and beauty.
Oh my God.
And so it's this idea of the Renaissance man that Leonardo da Vinci was, of you have to be as immersed in the arts as you are in science in order to be viewed as like a full human being. I think we need to bring that back here.
Yes. So I love this topic because there was a really cool TED talk about the importance of beauty, how beauty is not a luxury, it's actually critical for our mental health. So when I was giving one of my lectures at Google, it's so funny, like half of the lecture, which was unexpected, was about the importance of what you wear and what you hang and like what are you surrounded by. Because I mentioned it as a point that nothing is neutral. And because I'm working with like top innovators in the world, so the 0.00001% for them matters, right? So I'm like, okay, if that matters to you, then you need to pay attention to every detail. Meaning, if you are feeling sluggish or you're feeling X, there's science to back it up that if you wear yellow or orange, you will feel more energized. Or even when you go to the gym, there's more red there because that makes you more, gym-like. I don't know what the word is. But then also, again, what you place on the wall. Like, so that's why there's a lot of also, this is already shown science that if you place nature-like aesthetics in places of healing, that supports in the reduction of anxiety and stress. And that same principle goes to people who are looking to innovate or see the world differently. It's just you have to find the right kind of chords to put, whether it's in music, whether it's in furniture, and then you go into the whole world of even feng shui, like that. All these there's a reasoning as to why they matter for the people who do want to design the best life they possibly can have or contribute the most to the economy.
I totally agree, and I think we've established the grounds for the creative economy now and all of its benefits, and I think this is something that transcends any particular nation. But I wanted to talk now more specifically within the Saudi context because you moved here almost a year ago now. You moved here like beginning of the year, right? And you exhibited recently in the Ritz, and the exhibit was titled "The Love Letter to Riyadh." So clearly, you had somewhat of a good time here. But I really wanted to ask for your opinion now that you spent time working here, both in terms of your art and also in advising governments and private sector entities. What is your impression of the art world here, and particularly the creative economy?
So I'll answer that in different parts. So first part, as the hat of an artist. So one, I love Riyadh. I have to say, I did not plan to move here. It was kind of like divine intervention, but I am very grateful because this is one of the most special cities I've ever lived in. And I've lived in LA, New York, DC, other places, but very, very special. So start with gratitude. But one, as an artist, I actually struggled a lot to create this exhibition. And this kind of goes into the supply chain of what goes into creating an art exhibit. So you go from basic thing is space. It's very hard to find studio space here. And that's something that they're actually working on. So by next year, a lot of studio spaces should be opening up. Second is tools. Certain high quality paints that I'm used to accessing in the US, I don't find here, for example. And I have to say these things because they were challenging for me, and I'm hoping to find solutions for them. And then thirdly is, for example, structures to place your art on. So in the US, for example, I'm used to just purchasing them ready-made. Here, I actually had to hire an events company to produce them from scratch, which was quadruple the price than what I would have paid in the US. So that blocks, it's a barrier to entry that needs to be, and this is with time. Also, I have to appreciate that, 5 years ago, I don't know the exact amount of years, modern art was not really a thing here.
It wasn't. I mean, I grew up with no art, no music allowed in schools. So it is a huge change that we're keeping up with. And I think you're right to point out the ways in which, we're still growing.
Yeah. And again, Saudi overall is quantum leaping. So I say these things because they're easy fixes. They're not hard, right? The most important thing is, wow, at my opening, the level of appreciation for new kind of art here, for a new artist to be welcomed so beautifully is an artist's dream. And then the rapid growth of the diversity of artists here has been interesting. I would say some are really interesting quality and some aren't, but that's the beauty of art also. Like, you ask someone else who sees the same art piece that I saw or same collection, they're going to say a very different opinion. But how I measure how sophisticated an art market is one of them is diversity. How diverse is the art? And it was interesting. So my art is abstract art, so it's modern. And quite a few people who came to my exhibit asked me, but where are the figures? Where are the figures? And I said, this is abstract art. So I didn't expect, for example, to need to explain what abstract art is. But then I got quite a few comments of like, but my child can make this. Like, this is just, and they didn't mean it in bad, intentions. It just was, a lot of people think abstract art is easy. And it's just, someone would say, throwing paint on the canvas. But this is where I had to actually be challenged and go down the history of abstract art and learn, like, how did abstract art even come about? Why is it relevant? And then I came to my own conclusions why I think abstract art is so good for people with respect to portrait and all the other forms of art. But one I'll just say, one of the reasons I love abstract art is you have to come up with a conclusion as what are you looking at. And every time you see it, you will see something different if you are present and if you are in tune with yourself. And for me, it gives me, and I work with a lot of like high level people who are running large hedge funds or whatever it is, and have my art pieces in front of them. And they're like, Aida, I look at it and I feel like I can just get lost in it. And sometimes for people, especially who have very busy schedules, to just be able to look at a piece and breathe and not, you know what I mean? That's very valuable. So I'll pause there.
I see. And, obviously bringing this type of art to Saudi is very much appreciated because the art scene is still growing here after a very long pause. When we think about sort of the shutdown of the arts from the 79 onwards, basically up until 5-6 years ago, and we're kind of hitting that reset button. But that also is exciting for us because it gives us the opportunity to sort of do things from scratch and do them better and provide for artists in a way that mature markets have not. So you answered the question, I think, very well from a personal artist perspective. If you broaden that and look at it from a creative macro perspective, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, Saudi's doing part of the goal here is to diversify, right? The economic contributors to the economy, right? So moving away from oil to more diversified assets. So creative economy is critical for that. And Saudi, from what I've been experiencing, is doing that. And it's not just, again, in visual arts, but I'm seeing the gaming. Like there's a huge gaming conference this a few months ago. Even from entertainment, to have concerts and festivals and things like that, to film, like the amount of film screenings I've been invited to here is just so. I mean, I'm inspired. There is a consistent buzz here, but I think they're on the right track, to be honest. Of everything is coming into place, and it's very beautiful, actually. The way they're also doing it is making sure that a certain pie, like a large pie, is contributed by Saudi artists, which I actually love and respect. And they're recognizing in order to have this large pie, you have to train. So there's a lot of new training that is happening, I'm noticing, but then also support them with exposure to the outside market. Because if you get recognized and acquired by European entities, have a market in the US, etc., your art becomes more relevant and more, you have to be a global artist. There's no such thing as just local, at least in my eyes, and also the arts world side. So I've been noticing Saudi is not just doing a local push, but it's not just also a national push or regional, it's international, which is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not just supporting the local scene, but putting the local on the global stage.
Beautifully said.
Thank you. Then I think sort of to move into wrapping up, what I would love to hear is what you think of future trends, in particular for someone, who does one of the oldest forms of art now that I can think about it, to paint with your fingers, to look at the recent trends of involving AI more and more in the arts, the benefits of that, but also the dangers of that, what that looks like, if you've given thought to that.
Yeah, I have. So I was actually on the side of being very much against AI and using AI in art, but I was challenged. So in New York, I did an exhibition that was fully AI related. So I was invited to be part of it, and I said no. They said, be creative in your thinking. And at the time, I heard the news about the monarch butterfly being on the endangered species list, and I was really sad about that. So what I ended up doing is, how about I use AI? Because part of what I respect about art is art captures what is happening in this time period, right? So if you want to study history, one critical sector to study is actually art. What did artists portray in their art? You will learn so much. So I was like, okay, part of raising awareness around the monarch butterfly is information. And what I ended up doing is just working with AI. And I spent hours and hours with different questions and prompts. And, if I'm going this direction, what do you think? And it was helpful. It was, I don't think I needed it to create my art, but it was a new thing. So that's using AI as an aid and a support to your art creation. Like, I've started experimenting. I was like, so 10 years from now, where, if you were Aida Murad, where do you see her art direction going? And it'll come up with pieces for me. And some of them I really like.
Really?
Yeah. And it's learned my voice, it's learned my technique. So I think that's pretty cool, actually. But then you go into the other kind of extreme of art being fully created by AI. I don't judge that. It's just not my world, nor am I interested in that. And, some people say, Aida, are you worried that your art collectors and art collectors in general are going to now acquire AI art because it's cheaper, generally speaking? I'm like, no, I'm not worried, because there will be that train of art collectors that want AI art and are, in love with it. And there will be those conservative, quote unquote, conservative art collectors, or more traditional art collectors, that want to know the artist, want to
want a piece with a
want
story.
a piece of a human's touch. And I don't think that will ever change. I just think artists so I use AI in my business, because I also because there's art creation and there's running your business. So AI has just helped me make things easier.
But it's also, I mean, the art, quote unquote, created by AI is a bit unfair as well to the artists, because what is the AI model trained on? It's trained on
everyone. Exactly. So there's a huge, I think there was a big lawsuit on that, and by different. So yes, exactly. And for me, I don't get it as to why would someone. I don't know if I can even call it art, but then but I cannot dismiss something that is going to happen and that I don't fully understand, nor am I interested in understanding, to be honest. I will not jump on that train.
I totally understand. And I think it's a fight that needs to be had in terms of AI policy, even at a government level, to not only encourage the arts, but also to protect them.
Exactly. And it's what I'm loving, even seeing, just when you said government, I've been doing a bit of advocacy around art not being the first thing to be cut from government budgets, and which is why one of the raising awareness of how actually art is critical. It's not just a luxury or a beautiful object you put on the wall. And I've been happily seeing more traction. I think COVID was instrumental for that, because so many people spent time in confined spaces, and they recognized that art was, and I'm not just talking about paintings, but art, films, music really was what kept us sane, or a lot of us sane. So I'm glad to see a trend increasing of governments not cutting art as the first thing.
If anything, in the Gulf, we're seeing a trend of increasing spending on it.
Exactly.
I think that's exactly where it needs to be going.
And I think this is where Saudi Arabia could be a role model for the rest of the world, to be honest, because it is, the amount of work the Ministry of Culture is doing, and even the private sector is growing. It's beautiful.
It's really inspiring to see, and I think that's a positive note to end on. So thank you so much, Aida, for being here again today. It's been a lovely conversation.
Thanks for having me.